This is In Goal Radio, the podcast. We're working our way through the NHL pause and COVID-19 with a very unique episode, one that will deal with a great goaltender from the past who's now giving back and doing some goaltending instruction in South Florida, a southpaw, a guy that was as flexible as anybody I've ever seen play the position and has some real unique perspectives on the game and what he did during the course of his National Hockey League career, and that is Mathieu Garon. And then we will slide over to Michael Lawrence, the Wizard, on Twitter. Wizard ML is his handle. Coaches in Lugano in the Swiss Elite League, has coached among other people like Elvis Merzļikins from the Columbus Blue Jackets, but also has a tie to what is happening right now in the world with coronavirus, as he has been diagnosed and worked his way through that situation. He will tell us just what it's like and how it affects you, and coming out on the other side of it, what advice he has for everybody. As we say hello. And Darren Millard bringing in Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison from In Goal Magazine. Start with you, Hutch. Everything good, safe? I'm going to start this every week like this, and everybody's healthy?
Hard to come up with something original to say here. We're just getting used to each other, having two kids in the house doing school now remotely, as I think we all are. A lot of adjustments for everybody, but at the same time, it's a bit of an opportunity for us. I think we're managing to churn out a little bit more than we do when we're juggling a normal life and running from rink to rink. And I think it's important, not just from what we're doing, but for everybody we have a little bit of forced extra time on our hands. So can we use that time wisely? Woody, what are you up to?
Well, I know Woody's recovering, but not from the coronavirus, but from his all-star appearance, carrying the weight of our webinar that was on the air last week, talking about the Bauer line, and great response from the In Goal Premium viewers and subscribers, as well as some contributions from National Hockey League coaches. So, Woody, how are you feeling coming off that performance?
Yeah, that was. You guys know that was right in my wheelhouse, right? Because I was nervous at the beginning, because I've never done anything like that before. And so how do you fill what you think is empty air? I didn't know how to check who wanted to talk. Hutch had to teach me 5 minutes in how to click gallery view. Could only see like 3 people and there were 30 on the call. So I talked and I talked and I talked a little more until I finally realized that, oh yeah, these people might be able to, not add something, but they actually might feel like asking questions and speaking up. And man, some of the feedback we got from, not just from the pros who joined us, Billy Ranford chipped in, Eddie Kyoto chipped in, Freddie Brathwaite with that, fish net he had for a glove. Paul Sean
Von Trapper.
Yeah,
right?
It was huge. And then Paul Schoenfelder was on. He had to go put his daughter to bed, but Carolina Hurricanes American Hockey League development goalie coach. It was so cool. And also our listeners, so many good questions and insight and feedback from the people that joined us as members of Premium. It was awesome. And my promise to everyone is next time, Hutch, you guys know I won't live up to this promise, but I will talk less now that I know how to operate the machinery, so to speak.
No, I think it was a great initial foray into something that has massive potential. Because while our listeners and our subscribers enjoyed the podcast and enjoyed the website and the In Goal Premium side of things, Hutch, there's still another level and a real desire for knowledge.
Oh, for sure. And I think especially in this time, we're all starting to crave connection, and we're all stuck at home and living with our families, which is all a fantastic experience. But we want to connect outside, and we often talk about the hashtag goalie union. What a great opportunity to bring people together and be able to talk about what we love best. And I think in many ways, I don't know about you guys, but I think goaltenders probably crave connection a little bit more than the average folks. I mean, we go to the hockey rink whether it's as goaltenders or goalie parents, and you're sort of on an island unto yourself. So what a great opportunity to bring people from the union together and to talk. And one of the things I really enjoyed about it is quite often when we're putting content together for the site, we struggle with how to target it. And we'll have a back and forth. Is this too simple? Is this too complicated? it's really nice to be able to get that straight up feedback and listen to the questions that we have from people and know that there's this huge range of interests and experience and that we have to sort of, I think it helps us target what we're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, like, just so people know, the guys that joined us, the Billy Ranfords of the world, the Andy Kyotos, Paul Schoenfelder, Fred Brathwaite, Pete Martin from Pro Skate Goalie in Calgary, who had some great insights in terms of some of the questions about ordering and some of the specifics about gear towards the end. He joined us late. All organic. That was the beauty of it. We didn't, our heads are spinning now is whether we can schedule some of these guys to come on for a chat about goaltending, but I had no idea that those guys were going to show up for this, and to see them on board. And like I said, just chipping in and to have their insights and their answers was just, man, it was positive from my end to hear all that. It was so cool.
We'll get to Michael Lawrence and Mathieu Garon here in just a second, but I had a conversation with Billy just offline, and his answer and comment about the webinar was really sensational in the sense that he was there just to gain knowledge. He loves learning, so he'll do whatever it takes at whatever time. And now's a good opportunity to gain that knowledge. And it was an equipment review, and he was still on there doing his thing. So I thought that was a great testament to Billy.
And it would be a style of equipment that, would be quite foreign to him. Obviously, he grew up wearing softer equipment, softer pads, more flexible, a little more feel and tighter to the leg type of equipment. But so do his guys, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
Like we had Cal Peterson on the week before, and he talked about wanting tighter pads, and Jonathan Quick, whose pads are like pillow soft and as tight as they can be. And so, but he's going to have other prospects coming through. Like, speaking of Michael Lawrence, Jacob Ingham goes to his goalie schools in the summer, pro goaltending, and is on having a heck of a season and on a real nice career path, an LA Kings draft pick, but he's a guy that wears these Bauer pads. So, the more active rebounds and the conversations about how they perform and fit differently, I think that's so cool that you've got somebody who's already in the NHL that's looking to just learn as much as he can. Don't want to put words in his mouth. I'm not sure if that's why, but for sure, there's going to be kids that come along as part of the LA Kings organization that aren't always going to wear, Jack Campbell and Jonathan Quick. Like I said, you could take them like a xylophone and squeeze them. Those pads are so soft. Yeah, there's a new generation, and so an opportunity to learn about how that gear works.
That's your favorite instrument, isn't it?
I think you meant accordion both times. You can't do that with a xylophone.
Oh, see, I'm not that bright. I told you guys I'm musically inept. Xylophone and accordion. Do I have to go to the boxing field?
You have to be so strong to do that with a xylophone, Woody.
Well, I have been working out, but I'm pretty sure that's not gonna. So the fact that I was squeezing like an accordion,
it's all good,
and saying xylophone, the people at home just think I'm an idiot.
Okay.
It's all good.
I like watching you dance around that like a polka, which is traditional to the accordion, not the xylophone.
We have to do another one, though.
Conversations,
we have to get the gang together again and have another chat, I think.
Well, just one more thought, too. It was impressive that there were so many goaltenders that were young kids, minor hockey and junior hockey, but also a strong representation from the 40 and over group. And that was also very positive. Yeah, that was really cool, which gets me into the goalie mask contest and a great email that we got this week from Trevor Van Mackelberg. And his son Tristan submitted a copy and a great design, but they're from Deloraine, Manitoba, so I wanted to give them a shout out because from the Royals and southwestern Manitoba, a place that I know well. But I think it's really cool that we've got this strong following from 40 and over. Woody.
Yeah, no, we next time we're gonna have to place an over/under on the amount of hip surgeries that take part in a in-goal webinar, because we had a few. We had a couple guys that had both sides done.
Surgeries, and did we have a couple of replacements too?
I think we did,
which is different.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and the thinking going all along was they don't really like you playing after you have your hip replaced, playing goal. So I thought that was a real positive as well. That there's some guys who have had it swapped out and are still playing the position.
Bodes well for me because the guy's been told he'll eventually have to have his done. So that is a positive. And what I love too, we talked about learning. some of the guys that were of a certain vintage, and actually one may have been drinking a certain vintage as we chatted. Nice big glass of wine
Awesome.
there. But we had, and I can't remember the name, so I apologize in advance. But again, more our generation, but still, living and helping kids in minor hockey in a more remote area where there wasn't a lot of goalie coaching options, and he was
Right.
on there to learn and ask questions about how the gear worked, and then some coaching questions that he asked of Bill Ranford and Eddie Kyoto and those guys, so that he could help as a guy who's still trying to learn the modern game to teach, because that's not how he played. And Bill Ranford, we had Dusty Emu on talking about how you catch a puck, how to cushion a puck, the motion of it, similar philosophies there. That it was awesome, and so I'm looking forward to doing more of these for sure.
Well, taking the reins of goaltenders that don't have a lot of instruction available, catching the puck or catching a tennis ball, also an older goaltender who's learning new skills. It all goes into our webinar, but also this week's feature interview in Mathieu Garon. You'll get a dose of those topics, as well as what happens if your sticks aren't working for you and you're in the middle of a serious playoff series. It happened for Garon. And what did he do? He looked to a guy on the other team. It's fascinating stuff. This week's feature interview, Mathieu Garon, NHL veteran goaltender, Southpaw, on In Goal Radio, the podcast with Kevin Woodley.
So normally we start with where it all started for you. We like to ask goalies where the inspiration came from. But first off, for you, let's catch up with what you've been doing since you ended your career, 1 year in the KHL at the end after the Tampa Bay Lightning. Where's home for you now, and what have you been up to?
I live in Tampa now. I work for the Tampa Bay Lightning, community hockey. So what I do on a daily basis is basically I teach kids. Tampa, Florida is not known for hockey, so we teach the kids how to play hockey, how to hold a hockey stick. So we go to schools and mostly every day. And then I also do the stuff on the ice with them, like all the camps. We're on the ice almost every day, so it's fun to be around kids and teach them the basic of hockey, because there's not much going on here for you. There's a lot going on, but there's a lot of kids that grew up didn't know anything about hockey. And aside from that, I also do goalie lessons. So I work with probably 30, 40 goalies here in Florida. Some of them are on a weekly basis. Some are a couple times a year. So it's fun to be around hockey players.
Of course, Tampa Bay Lightning were the final 2 years of your NHL career. So what was it about the area that attracted you to stay, other than the fact it's probably gorgeous weather? A little nicer in the winter than Quebec.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I think at this point of my career, like my kids were older, and I played for 6 different teams. So every other years we would be moving. So I think it was more like staying in one place. And now they were older, they had friends and schools they liked. So it was more about the kids, but also, it's hard not to love Tampa.
Okay, well, I'd like to come back to the coaching stuff later. And just get you to reflect a little bit on how it's changed. But in order to get there, let's go back to where it started for you. We get so many different answers. There's a few common threads here, but for you, how did you become a goaltender? What attracted you to the position? How did it start?
Goalie equipment. I think just the fact that goalies were wearing like different gear, bigger gear. Obviously, when I was a fan of goalies, goalie gear was brown and old, but it was I think it was just the equipment. And then obviously getting a little older, Patrick was obviously an inspiration for me, and then being a big fan of Montreal Canadiens and also the Quebec Nordiques back then too.
Now, did you play out as well, or were you strictly a goalie? What age did it become something that went from, hey, I just want to be a goalie, to something that got a little serious for you?
I think the first 2 years I was a defenseman, because my dad didn't want me to be a goalie. He wanted me to start skating, learn how to skate, obviously. And it was always like, even though like I wanted to score goals, I think it was always about retrieving in my zone and taking care of the net. So being a really defensive defenseman. So after a few years, he let me become a goalie full time, and I'm glad it happened.
Do you remember roughly the age? Because I mean, obviously, the one thing I noticed, you got to play at the Quebec Pee Wee tournament, which is an iconic event. So, how long had you been a goaltender by the time you hit the Pee Wee age?
A long time. I think I started really young to play in a team. I was like 4 or 5, and probably 6 or 7 when I turned full-time goalie. And yes, I went to the Quebec Pee Wee tournament, and it's funny because 2 years ago, my son with his team here in Tampa, we had a chance to go back to the Pee Wee tournament. So it was a very good event for us.
Now, obviously, for a lot of everybody knows what the tournament is, but not everyone gets to experience it. In your words, having been there as a young guy and now on the coaching side or with your son, how would you describe it? Like, does all the sort of hype do it justice? What makes that event so special for hockey players?
It is very special for a different reason. I mean, you get to play teams from all around the world. We played a few exhibition games. I think one was Switzerland, one was Japan. Like these kids will never have that same experience ever. And the fact that you play in the NHL building with I know our game, we were playing right before the main opening game, so there was probably 10,000 people in the building when we played with my son. So it's a great experience, and to this day, the kids are still talking about it. Most of them are still friends with their billet family, because when we went there, the kids were living in the family, a couple of them in each family. So they still talk about that. They still talk to those families. So it's just an experience they'll never forget.
It sounds like a great experience. So from there you move up, obviously play minor hockey, but into junior, have an incredible junior career, QM, JHL, and CHL goalie of the year in 97, 98. Can you share with us, and obviously our audience is all goaltenders, what your development path was like back then? Like some of the influences in terms of coaching. When did you have your first goalie coaching? How much of it was at that age? We're talking sort of mid to late 90s, was just you learning on your own, and how much structure was there back then?
Yeah, it was way different back then. I mean, I first had my first goalie coach actually was Francois Allaire, so I've got the right one to start with.
Not
But
bad.
I was about I was 16, 17 when I turned junior after my midget AAA. So that's the first time I met him, and he changed everything. Like I mean, I remember after the first practice I had with him for an hour and a half. I got out of there and I told my dad, I'm like, wow, I learned so much today. I learned more than I learned over the previous 10 years or something. So it was great to have him around me. And then from then, he would follow me juniors, and then even NHL, we would still talk. And every summer, probably 10 of French Canadian goalies would skate together. I see Luongo's jersey behind you. Luongo was one of them. Biron, Giguère, like a bunch of goalies. We were all there every summer. So it was obviously Francois was the biggest change for me in my career.
Well, you've definitely got fans of Francois here at the in goal side. We've been pushing for him to be that first goalie coach in the Hall of Fame. I think it's about time we had one, and there'd be no better one to go in first. So, what were those like? I've talked to Marty Biron about those camps in the summers, and I think from the outside he gets branded as so technical. But I remember Biron talking to me about they'd be doing like just all kinds of crazy drills. Sometimes it wasn't all technique. There were things that I don't think a lot of us, the stereotype of Francois Allaire isn't necessarily fair to him as a teacher.
Yeah, no, I think he was. I mean, obviously, the technical part was a big part of his teaching. But he was he would come up with different things, and for me, like with Francois, it was more like the thinking, the reasoning behind everything. Like he would like, okay, why would you do that? There, like it was not just like do it or something. There was always like the questioning behind it, and like trying to come up with new thing, and always trying to be the first one to come up with something and find just a little thing that's going to make a difference.
What so you get drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. What's that experience like as a guy who grew up? Like, were you? That's presumptuous of me actually to assume you were a Habs fan, but you mentioned What was it like to get drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, high pick, 44th overall, and spend your first 5 years in that organization?
Yeah, it was amazing. I think it was a dream come true for me. Like playing for my. I mean, I grew up for probably 4 or 5 hours away from Montreal, but it was like my hometown team. It was great. It was such a great organization, and then be part of all that history was something special. Like getting to play my first NHL game with them was great, and remember working with Rolly Melanson in Montreal. He was really good with me too. He was very intense. Like I had to work hard with him. Like I remember being on the ice like half an hour before and half an hour after every practice with him. But I learned so much, and it was a good compliment from Francois, because Rolly had more of the like trying to force me to stay more on my feet sometimes, like being more patient, not use my butterfly as much, and the stick handling and everything. It was just a great addition to have Rolly as a goalie coach too.
What did it mean to have Rolly? Because, I was just doing the math in my head, because I know Rolly, like, he actually started doing a little coaching while he was still playing. And so by the time you had him, he only would have been 3 or 4 years removed from his playing career. Was there, so not, not like 20 years since he's played. Was it easy to make a connection with him as a player just because he was so close to having played himself?
Yeah, it was. He was fresh off of playing. I don't have the numbers either, but he was. He had been in the league for a long time, been around, and he was. It was a great, really good with me. Like he could find like at the time was with Jose Theodore, and every goalie is different. It was good to see how Rolly was adjusting from Jose to me, and trying not to have us do the same things, because we had different skills, different strength in our games, and he was really good at coaching each individuals.
Yeah, I saw that. I got the pleasure of watching Rolly work here in Vancouver with the Canucks for several years, and talking to the goalies that work with him, and that certainly echoes everything I've heard as well from them. I wanted to ask you a little bit. You talked about gear and loving the gear and falling in love with the position because of the gear. Kind of, I'm trying to do the math in my head. Would you have been a guy who growing up would have had pads that, like, would you have been a part of that revolution or evolution from pads that necessarily didn't rotate to sort of the modern pads where your leg would rotate in them and they'd have a landing gear? Was that part of your career?
Yeah, I was more, the first part, like the really tight pad.
Yeah.
Mine weren't turning much. I had the double flex on the knee because I didn't like this the stiff. Like I would have a hard time right now probably with the stiff Bowers or the real straight ones.
Those ones over my shoulder.
It's all like, for me, it's more about like getting used to something and liking it. I would probably not be good at I feel like the goalie gear has changed so much lately that I'd probably be the old school guy with like Fleury with the leather strap still and then no Velcro. So, but it's amazing now, like coaching all those goalies, all the little things. Now the pads are so light. They're barely tight to your legs. Like I remember back then when Patrick Lalime was wearing his pads, like he would always almost lose his pads, but I was like looking at it like, oh my gosh, what is he doing? But it's the new thing now. It's just like, it's me being old, I think.
I'm curious, what the first time you got one that wasn't tight, that had that landing gear that you could sort of land on and rotate it, like, do you think that was a big difference for, like, as far as the evolution of the position, the ability to have a pad that would, as you drop to the ice, land flat and you could slide around? I guess I ask it because we're seeing a lot of these, classic games. The NHL's on pause and they're showing us a lot of classic games, and every recovery is scrambling back to the feet. And the irony, of course, is in today's game, a lot of coaches are trying to get guys to recover back to their feet more, but the ability to slide and stay on and move laterally without having to get up, that was largely started with the pads allowing you to do that. And I wonder, do you think that was a massive change for goalies and the way the position was taught? Because you would have been, it would have been earlier in career, but you would have been a part of that.
Yeah, I was a part of that, and I remember like having the piece on the inside, like the flat piece, made a big difference because now you would fall and you'd be solid, like you wouldn't fall forward or backward. You'd be like strong on the ice, so it made a big difference. Because when it was just like wrapped around your calf before, it was like no, you would just like land and out of position all the time.
Yeah. Do you remember? I'm trying to do the math in my head on when that was, because it predates me starting with goaltending. So probably around in the 90s.
Yeah, I would say 93, around there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I remember my first pair of Lefebvre were 94, 95, around there. And I feel like that's when it started to change a little bit more. Yeah.
And you were a Reebok guy coming up with the Lefebvres as well. A lot of, I was looking through some of the setups over the years. You build a good relationship with them as part of, being from Quebec and them being the producers?
Yeah, they were really good with me. Michel Lefebvre and his son, they would always do stuff with me. I know they stopped making the masks after a while, but for me, they kept it because I had the mold and everything. So they were always nice with me. And I mean, I know a lot of goalies these days, and like they go with contracts with companies and stuff like that. But for me, it was not about the money. It was about like wearing what I liked, and I'm one of those guys. Like I started with that, and I'm very loyal. I finished with everything, even though like after a while, like there's so many options. Like I felt bad even looking at other companies.
You mentioned Jose and playing with him in Montreal, Theodore, and we're talking about equipment. How tough? Like I'm assuming because you catch with your right that you're left-handed, but it's not always the case. How tough was like getting equipment, especially when you were younger, in terms of getting a right catching glove? And then I wanted to talk about Jose isn't the only time you had a guy who on your team who also caught right. That's becoming increasingly rare, but you had a few.
Yeah, it was. Yes. Going to your first question, it was hard to find. I remember when I was lucky, there was one goalie glove in the store that was for me on my side, but. And then you can order online back then. So it was just like you buy whatever there is there. So that was the first part. And obviously playing with Jose, being a full right too, was my first experience in the NHL. I had Mason and Columbus too, both of us. But going back to Montreal, my first camp in Montreal, it was Theodore, Jablonski, Vokun, me, and Thibault. Thibault was the only goalie not full right. So 4 out of 5 were full right goalies. So you'll never see that again.
I was going to say, because you and Steve Mason were the last sort of complete season tandem of 2 full right guys. We've seen a few guys get together for stretches. Michael Hutchison this year with Pavel Francouz, both, but only for a couple weeks before they shut the season down. Did you get to try each other's gear more? Because that's the other thing. When you could never try stick patterns or different blockers or different gloves with any other combo, unless that must have been a great year for it.
That was fun, and even with Jose and Mason, both of them, I would because when you try a glove that's not on your side, I mean you can't get a good feel for it. So that was I remember practicing with Jose's glove a few times too, because I had issues with my glove. And one time later in my career, when I was with Pittsburgh in the playoffs in 2009, we played Washington, and Theodore was for Washington. I started using his sticks for practice because my stick had issues with my stick too. So he gave me 2 or 3 of his sticks, and we were playing against him. I was using his sticks, but obviously I wasn't playing, but for practices.
Oh, that's great. I had to write on this recently, and I never, to be honest, I always think glove, but it's also the blocker and it's also the stick. Was it tough to find, the right twig when you were younger? Just you had to take whatever they had.
It was hard. And going back to Jose's giving me a few of his stick, I never with CCM or Reebok at the time, they wouldn't make my pattern composite because it was hard to. So I had no chance to use it. So that's why I tried one of his Bauer stick one time. Like I want to know the feeling with a composite stick. So it was fun. It was hard to find equipment. You're right.
Now I got to ask you, because it was shocking to me when I started looking at the numbers, just how few right catching goalies, full right goalies there are anymore. And it may just be part of a trend. But, a couple of years ago, there were 43 starts. That's how many starts in the NHL. The last time it was that low was 1963-64, when there were just 6 teams in the NHL. So, from the 80s of, 12 goalies in the league that caught that way and 300 plus starts, through the 90s, steady around the 200 starts, down to under 50 just a couple of years ago. I think we had 70 this year. As a guy who's a full right himself, any theories, any idea on what is just maybe a historical trend, or, it should be easier, shouldn't it, to get gear now?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about like the 70s and 80s being low, I'd be like, well, it's probably because those goalies were forced to switch, like to play, even though they were full right to play in the normal side. But now I don't have an answer for you. It's just weird that there's trends like this.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure it out. One of the theories was back in the 70s and 80s, you might be able as a young guy to just use a baseball glove. And nowadays, everything has to be so specialized. So maybe even though it's easier to order it online, maybe in minor hockey, it's not as easy as we think. So food for thought. Listen, I don't want to keep you on that one. Montreal, LA. When you went to LA for a couple of years and then to Pittsburgh, you get traded to Pittsburgh in 2009 and you go on to win the cup that year. What was that experience like?
That was great. That was perfect timing. At the time, I was in Edmonton, and
Sorry, I
missed
the stop.
That year we started the season with 3 goalies, and it didn't work out for me practice wise. Like it's hard to have 3 goalies. Like there's only 2 nets, right? So that was a hard time. Then I got traded to Pittsburgh. A little shocked, but I got there. I think we were in 10th place. We were not in the playoffs. And within a couple of weeks, they changed coach, and we started winning. We started playing really well, and being part of that team. Like first of all, like my teammates were amazing. Like we had so much fun. We're still all in the group text right to this day. Like still talking on group text. So it's
wow.
Something amazing. Yeah, but I mean, playing with Fleury too was great. So we started winning. We went on a run in the playoffs, and you never know in the playoffs, but we had that power of being down 1 goal in the 3rd period, and we got this one. We got to get a power play. These Malkin and Crosby are going to make it happen. And it was great. It was obviously when you dream about winning the Stanley Cup, you're usually in net. You're not in your dreams. You're not sitting on the bench, but I wouldn't change it for anything. It was just being part of that group and having a chance to win it in my career. It was a great experience.
You're 10 years into your career at that point. What did you see in a young Marc-Andre Fleury then that was there anything there that you're like this, that you knew he'd have the career he's had?
I mean, I knew for sure, like his footwork is amazing. He's so quick. But is the compete level in the practices? He loves to have fun. He's a total different goalie. I mean, he's the one that 5 minutes before warm up, he's still not dressed, and he gets there late. He's not like I think he doesn't want to have a routine. He wants to. If it's too tight, he's not feeling well. He needs to be loose. So he's a total different goalie. But in practices, he fights hard, and he really wants to stop all those pucks. And it was at that time I was older, but it was good for me to be around him and see like, oh my God, that's what it is to compete. Like I thought I was competing hard, and I think I was a goalie that works hard in practice, but the compete level was totally different with him.
It's funny because he talks about he's the last goalie that we're aware of that still plays last puck even when he's starting in the pregame warmups, and that energy, that the fun, the compete, but also the having fun part seems to be such a staple for him and important for him. He's talked with me about it. Is there a lesson there for young kids too, that you can be that determined and that competitive, but if you're not having fun, you know the game's still got to be fun?
Yeah, and
break that with your kids?
Back in my career, I wish I would have been more like this, because I mean it's a grind. Like a season's a grind. You practice every day. Like if you're serious all the time, and like it's good to be serious and wanting to be work hard and everything, but if you don't have fun, some days it's not fun to go. It's like going to the office. If it's not fun, you're not performing as well. So watching him and having fun like this, I think it's a good lesson for everybody. You see him smile like when he makes a save, and when I remember the playoff against Ovechkin, he would chirp Ovechkin. He would stop in and it would be like making those sounds like "woo," stuff like that. You won't see many goalies do that, but it's refreshing, and it's like it'd be fun to be around him. Like even for his teammates, being around this guy is amazing.
Well, I can't believe I missed Edmonton when I was running through the timeline to get to Pittsburgh, because I actually had an Edmonton question I wanted to ask you. You signed there as a UFA in 06-07. You went 10-0 in shootouts, 30 of 32. So if somebody asked you, what's your advice on shootout? What was your approach to shootouts at that time? And is there anything that you think translates into lessons you could teach, whether it's kids or other young up and coming goaltenders, on how to have success in a shootout?
Yeah, well, for me, Matt, I think if you look at clips, I mean, I was very aggressive. Like I would go above the hash mark and start like with a lot of speed going backwards. I think at this point it was more like forcing them to deke me because I knew I had speed to go left or right. I felt better than having them shoot on me. Like I've always, I think I was more effective at sliding and reacting to a deke. So I would force them to deke me. Would go really high and try to come with a lot of speed going backwards. And I remember actually against Vancouver, look, we had so many shootouts against them that year, and they were trying, and like they would stop, they would take slap shots. Like at some point they would try something different, but it was one of those years. Like I feel like everything was clicking, and the year after, I started to do video and study guys more, and it didn't go as well. Like I started being not being as good. So I think it's good to know. Okay, well, if you play, you go against a Braden Point. He likes his shot low blocker, right? Low glove for me, low blocker. It's good to know stuff like this on players. Like have a good like sense of what they like to do. But you can't be thinking too much when you have a shootout. Like you just have to react. Like you just read if the puck is in front of them. You read a deke. If the puck goes on the side, you read shot. And obviously, unless you play against Datsuk, then it's a different thing. He can deke you anyway. But it's more read. Like you don't want to be thinking, oh, I think he's going to shoot. I think he's just like react to what they're doing.
Well, in an era where there's never been more pre-scout information available, I still talk to goalies today. Some guys want to know it, but a lot of them too much information because then they start to, back of your head, you can start to cheat to something that might not happen. And that's usually when you're in trouble. So that makes a ton of sense. Then on to Columbus and your partnership with Steve Mason, another all lefty tandem. The one thing I never asked you before about catching right, especially to get in when you're in a full season with another guy who does it. What'd you hear from the shooters? Like, do you think in an era where maybe when the pre-scouts and we get into playoffs and everyone's like, okay, they lock in on a guy, but in an 82 game season and it's different goalie every night, could it be an advantage where guys in their head, they come down, they don't look up, they just assume it's low blocker and boom, it's right into your glove? Can that actually help?
I'm sure it makes a big difference for a shooter. I think I realize it more now that I'm coaching goalies. Sometimes I have full rights or regulars, so it makes a difference for a shooter. But I remember after that second year in Columbus, we had a few of our players that went to see the GM and said, okay, the reason why we're not scoring goals is because we're used to shoot on these guys during practice. So when Columbus didn't re-sign me that year, that's the excuse they told me. They told me, we don't want two full rights. Guys are saying that's the reason why they can't score in a game, so we're going to have to let you go. So I don't know if it makes such a difference or it was just an excuse for players that couldn't score, but I guess it does.
I remember that now. It was Scott Howson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've forgotten all about that. Now you've just brought that back into my memory. That's an interesting take on their part for sure. So there you go to Tampa Bay, but the positive side is you end up in Tampa Bay with the Lightning and last couple of years of your career, and you're back there in Tampa Bay now. I wanted to ask you one last one about the career. After the 2 years in Tampa, you decided to spend a year in the KHL. What was that like after close to a decade in the NHL to heading overseas and spending that year in the KHL? And 2013-14, so it would have been a different year over there. Like I know it's evolved, but what was it like back then?
It was, my experience was a nightmare. I'm not saying the whole thing is a nightmare, but I got there. I went to Ellie's training camp that year. I got cut the last day before a season. So I joined the team in Russia. They were probably 20 games in. And the whole thing for me, being in the NHL for that long, being used to be in a regular rink. So just a bigger rink, Olympic rink was a big, big difference for me. In Russia, the players are not playing the same way. Like they would have a grade A scoring chance. You're like, okay, he's gonna shoot for sure, and they would go for like a spin, find somebody else. Like for me, like the reading the game there was really hard, and even breakaways. I feel like everything was different, and I could never adjust. And it was like I got injured, tore my groin. So after 3 months, he decided to buy me out. it was probably a good thing for me. Like I didn't feel anything was my mind was not at the right place. Obviously, I was a little disappointed that my NHL career was over. I knew it was my last year, no matter what. So it's just it was. I'm glad I went. It was a good experience, but on the ice was not my best performances.
Well, and we've heard that from other guys. I remember Pekka Rinne when he went over at one point during a lockout shortened season. Same thing. He just said that it was pass, 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 have a grade A chance, dust it off, and pass again. Like they just never shot. So the style of game was just so different. It would have been a tough adjustment. You go back to Tampa Bay right away after that, and just walk us through. We started it and we'll end it there in terms of coaching and what you enjoy about coaching. Go ahead.
So yes, I came back to Tampa, retired, and I stayed close with Franz Jean, the goalie coach here. It's always been great to me. And then slowly, the following years, like he started, we always kept in touch, and I helped him with the development camp with the goalies here, the rookie goalies, and it was fun. I learned a lot out of him. And then from there, I decided, okay, well, it's a good something I like to do. I like to teach kids, and I started working with kids, and now it's a matter of I'm very busy with my other job too, the full-time job with the Lightning. So as much as I can be on the ice, I'm on the ice. I'm trying to be on the ice almost every day with the goalies. I learned a lot. It's amazing. Like every kid is different, so the way I teach one kid is totally different from another one. You just have to find a way they're going to listen to you and understand what you're saying. So for me, it's something like I like in every kid that I have. It's a different challenge, every kid. And I like to know like what they like, what pushes them in life. So that's the way sometimes to get to them. And I really enjoy it.
It's more about working with the person than it is necessarily the technical goaltender. Sounds like.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're really enjoying it too. If you can compare that to you as a young kid growing up and first playing goal, like where are these kids now in terms of how they move and how they play? What do you think's the biggest difference there? Is it just the coaching?
Coaching, and I mean the whole hockey in general. I mean the everything got so much better. I'm teaching kids. I mean some of them are 10, 12-year-old, and they're way better than technically way better than I was like when I was 16, probably. Like it's just, I would say there's probably a five year, as far as movements and stuff. Obviously those kids can't take a shot from a 16-year-old. It's totally different. But
right.
As far as technical and movements, there's probably a 5-year difference from what I was playing.
So I've seen this since I started writing about goaltenders, probably around 2003, 2004. I remember even back then, in the NHL, proper leg recovery, not everybody got up with the right leg. And guys then would say, I go to these camps and I see these 12-year-olds and they move better than me. And so we hear that still. The one thing that we sometimes seem to lose, or at least I hear from coaches at different levels, is the ability to read the game, to play the game, for lack of a better term. They can move and they can play the drills, but to play the game. What do you think, in your opinion? What do you see there? And is there a way, is there a reason for it? Is there a way we can help these kids, learn to sort of read things and read the game? Other than, of course, reading In Goal magazine, which we always recommend.
As they should, right?
Yeah, of course. Shameless.
The one thing sometimes I notice with kids is that I will put a drill together where I'm skating with the puck or I'm attacking from the corner or something. And one of the first questions I ask them is like, how would you play it for a lefty, or how would you play it with a righty? It's easy to play. Like I feel like it's a different read if it's a lefty coming at you or a righty, but most of the kids don't realize it. When I ask the question, they're like, "Oh, it takes a while," and then they're like, "Oh, it makes sense." Like if it's a righty coming from their right side, I mean the shot is a better angle for a shot. If it's a lefty, there's no angle. So it's something that kids, most of the kids have a hard time. They just see a player coming at them. They don't realize, okay, the lefty or righty, I have to play it different. So for me, that's one thing as far as a read that at a young age, we still have to tell them, okay, if it's a righty, you're going to play it totally different there. And then they realize it makes sense.
Well, it's funny when we do our pro reads now, one of the new things that we do at In Goal is where the NHL guys look at video and share with us as the play moves around a zone all the different elements that they're thinking about. And that's one of the first things. It's not just the guy with the puck either. It's where that guy is on the back door or at the face-off dot for a 1T, lefty, righty. So that makes a ton of sense as far as being a big part of the read.
And then, another thing too on the, like, when there's a rush coming at you, like, it's one thing to be focused on the shooter, but you have to read, is it a 2-on-1? Is it a 3-on-2? What's coming at me? And the guy on the back door, is he going to be on this like a one-timer? What's going to happen if he gets it? Can he shoot it right away, or can he come back in the middle? So it's all about read. Like, it's not just who has the puck, it's everything that's going on the ice.
Okay, speaking of reading, this is my last one for you. I know we're all sort of stuck off the ice right now. It's not easy for any of us. Is there anything you're doing with kids that you're still in touch with? Even if it's as simple as we're putting together a book list here, like recommended reading for young goaltenders, or are there things that you're advising guys to do to make sure that, not just to kill some time, because we've all got so much of it right now, it seems, but ways you can get better as a goaltender without necessarily getting on the ice?
I mean, there's a lot of things I'm sure online, and I'm sure you guys show a lot of those things, but a lot of like just body weight exercises. You don't need any weight. Like anything that involves like I like to say, like, it's nice to do like squats and two legs and everything, but for goalie, you're always, most of the time you're on one leg, like trying to shift left and right. So everything that's one leg, like the lunges, everything like sideways is what I recommend to my goalies. Everything. Obviously, there's you can baseball like a tennis ball off the wall and catch it with your bare hand. I remember being Sean Burke's playing with Sean Burke a little bit in LA, and his ritual before a game, he would ask the backup goalie. So like I would be like, I didn't get to play much with him, but the games I was with him, to throw a tennis ball at each other, but you can only catch it with your like with one hand, and then really, but it's amazing. Like a lot of kids, and even I at that point, like it's hard to catch like a hard throw with a tennis ball just with one hand and just catch it. It just like, for him, it was like, he's like, I can't believe like you and even younger kids, like nobody can catch a tennis ball like barehanded.
Do you think that's because we probably, like, increasingly, I don't know about yourself, but increasingly it becomes so specialized at a young age that kids aren't playing other sports?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Mathieu, I really appreciate this. We went longer. Darren Millard is going to be laughing at me right now because I have a habit of going longer, but I really enjoyed the conversation, and I know our audience is going to as well. So thank you very much for taking the time out today in Tampa Bay and sort of walking us through and sharing some of the experiences of your career.
Great. Anytime. And you guys are doing an amazing job. Congratulations.
Thanks, Mathieu. Take care. All the best.
You're welcome.
That was so good. I listened to it twice, and Woody, don't feel bad if you ask 1, 2, 3, 4 extra questions, as long as they're good questions. I'm not going to be all over you. And that was great. Just first off, that Jose Theodore story about using his sticks during a playoff series, and I know that Garon wasn't playing, but still, that's I'm not sure that some coaches wouldn't be thrilled with that.
Well, I mean, as he said, it was his chance to try composite, right? Because he was having trouble getting it for full right. And the funny thing is I hadn't talked to Mathieu in a long time, and I emailed him kind of looking for some quotes for a story that was originally a shorter version at NHL.com on full right goalies, and then the longer version we ended up running after talking to him at Ingle Mag and Ingle Premium. It really turned into not just sort of what it's like to be a full right goalie and some of those stick issues that he talked about, borrowing Theo's, trying Theo's glove when they were together with Montreal, but just the disappearance, the seeming disappearance of full right goalies in the NHL. And Hutch did up a great chart that was at Ingle Premium that ran with the story. Like, we had like 360 some odd starts in the mid 80s at a time when finding gloves for your right hand should have been harder. We were down to 43 2 years ago, 43 starts by NHL goalies. That was the lowest total since 1963-64 when there were 6 teams. So yeah, like it was kind of one of those, you go looking for something about what it's like to catch with the other hand and how it affects shooters. And you end up with this story on like, holy crap, I didn't realize just how much, how much of a down cycle it seemed to be. And, we went into some of the possible reasons for it. And Matthew was so good with it. By the time we got back to me, one of the stories had already published at NHL.com, but not at Ingle. And I just asked him if he'd have more time. And so we started going back through the career, and he ended up being, looking for some quotes on Full Right, and such a good interview. I wish we'd had even more time because his insights were awesome. I really enjoyed it.
I was fascinated when we put that chart together, guys. It immediately came to mind as I saw, numbers climbing through the late 70s, early 80s. And I started thinking, is there one or two workhorses out there that might be affecting those numbers? So we laid the careers of a few of the prominent full right goaltenders on top of that chart, and not all by any means, mostly just for style reasons, wanting it to look nice and clean. But it was in the time of Tom Barrasso and Grant Fuhr, guys I thought might be eating up a lot of games, that we actually started to see the fall in number of games played by full right goaltenders. So
Darren Pupa was in that realm.
So Tony Esposito can't be the only reason that it rose all the way up till about 1984, 85.
What was the number from 1963?
Woody, sort of 50-ish or something?
Yeah, I think it was
53, I think maybe.
And so I was listening to the interview while I was out for a ride, and I listened back to it because it kept thinking, okay, 6 teams in 63, and that 50 number is out there. Terry Sawchuk had 48 of them.
Yeah, he definitely would have skewed a few of those numbers.
No doubt.
Yeah. But it's just it was low then, but it was one guy that was carrying them. So we've gone through this. Well, we're talking a lot about the curve, right? With what's going on in the world right now. But we had our peak in the 80s, 90s, and now we're back to what it was beforehand.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, it's to bring it back to the Garon conversation. It kind of started to slip around. 2010, 2011, the next year, 2011, 2012 was, almost 300 starts. And then it started to slowly fall off to that low of 2 years ago where it was 46 starts 2 years ago, not 43, as I said a few minutes ago. And interestingly enough, not that either him or I are implying that it had anything to do with it, but about the time the Columbus Blue Jackets decide, hey, we can't have two of you, it's not good for our shooters, and actually blame a lack of offense on it, kind of coincides with maybe it's just a coincidence and part of the cycle, but that kind of coincides with, the dip a year later starts to drop down. And hey, this could all change. Cal Peterson is a heck of a young goaltender we had on the podcast last week, and his starts are going to go up over the next couple of years. We got the Askarov kid in Russia is probably going to be the first goalie picked in this next draft. Pavel Francouz has obviously had a great start at the age of 29 to his pro career. He'll eat up a few more. So yeah, I'm not declaring the death of full right goalies, or this is a trend that will last forever by any stretch, but it's definitely a trend.
I have a question for you though.
Yeah.
Both of you. Hutch, you can answer first. We are on record as declaring or acknowledging that a bigger goaltender will be drafted ahead of a 6-foot goaltender. Are we all in agreement there? So somebody 6'4", 6'5" will be drafted ahead of somebody that's 5'11", 6 feet.
Not all other things being equal.
Oh, I don't even think they all need to be equal. I'll give you that one, right. 99 out of 100.
Yeah, you're right.
How much better then does a southpaw, a right-handed catching goaltender, have to be than a left-handed catching goaltender if you're a National Hockey League team and you're making your draft list?
I think it's a great question, and something that came up in a conversation with a former NHL goaltending coach. Maybe we'll get him on here at some point to answer this specific one. Because when I asked about that, as we were looking at a bunch of juniors, he said, well, you just think about all the full right goaltenders that we've had over the years, and he starts mentioning the Fuhrs and the Espos of the world. They've all been so good. I think before you take a guy, you got to know he's going to be at that level. And I still don't quite grasp why it's okay for a regular catching goaltender to just be normal, and why you have to succeed at that level. But there was that question of just having to be that good, and there's a barrier for you to get over.
Well, it's interesting because when you look at it, there are some guys that, are in the league that not in prominent roles. Louis Domingue is one of the guys that's still around, kind of, he's settled in as more of a backup. Charlie Lindgren, I forgot to mention him as a guy who could be eating up a lot of starts in the future as a young up-and-comer. But when you look back over the history, like Jonas Hiller was really good for a long time. Thomas Vokoun, to me, is one of the more underrated goalies of his generation. He was a guy that was big on that list. Jose Theodore won an MVP award. So that, Rick DiPietro didn't have a long career, but drafted so high and touted so highly. Like, the names on here are, dominated by elite high-end guys, even more recently than, the Grant Fears of the world. So, could you make the argument? I don't know.
But that almost begs almost the opposite, though, Woody. Like, so many have been so good that doesn't that tell you should let a few more have the opportunity?
Or you just have to dominate so much at a younger level to get the opportunity, and you have to be that good to get a chance. And maybe it's because, Hutch, I know you've experienced this in minor hockey. I've experienced it. Matter of fact, it's one of the reasons I stopped agreeing to do minor hockey assessments of goaltenders is sometimes the kids that don't look like goalies get cut first, whether they have more talent or not. And that can be mismatched gear, could be gear that just looks ratty and old compared to new stuff. It sucks. It shouldn't be that way, but quite often it is that way. And I just can't help but think of the number of times over the year I've had people say that sort of the full rights, the guys that catch with the right hand, they just look different. They don't look the same. And whether it's on purpose or not, maybe there's this subtle weeding out of guys even at a very young age. Just that path becomes that much harder for them. None of the guys we talked to confirm that. None of them.
Yeah, we do have to be careful about sample size here, which we talk about all the time. This is such a small sample size, and all it takes is Cal Peterson to go on a run next year and he doubles the number. So really tough. But Darren, you brought up size in drafting, and Kevin, you mentioned Jose Theodore. So there's a guy who won a Hart Trophy not too long ago at 5'11". So he does both.
Yeah, he was 6'2" with the toque.
Yeah, that was epic style.
I'm gonna. It's the toque's still on in his mask shelf. And that's another thing that's coming out of all this this COVID and all the Zoom interviews. We're getting a good look at some people's some goaltenders' man caves and viewing areas, aren't we? Like Mason has a great one going.
Brian Elliott,
Bill Ranford, Brian Elliott has an awesome one. That thing's spectacular. In the background with Billy was a couple of masks. It's kind of cool to see everybody with their display. Our good friend Alex Auld has his mask out.
That was a fun one, actually. That's another one that if you haven't checked out already, to the listeners, check it out at In Goal Premium. Just before the league got shut down, Alex came to the rink at Rogers Arena to pick up a bag of masks. And I couldn't figure out, what the deal was. He'd had a property that he purchased when he was in Florida, and they kept it as a rental property. Mostly Panthers players that had come through there after he left would rent the property off him. And he just left some of his stuff there, including this bag of masks from his career. And so finally this year he arranged, I think he sold the property, but he arranged for the bag of old equipment and old masks to be picked up or dropped off at the Florida Panthers facility. And then when the Canucks went through town, the equipment managers were gracious enough to throw it in with theirs and bring it back to Vancouver. And so I was there in Vancouver when Alex picked it up, and I'm like, hey, why don't we have a quick go through? And so we pulled out the video camera. He walked us through all these masks, and I'm telling you, there is a treasure trove of hidden stories. Masks from all kinds of different mask makers. Eddie, Michel Lefebvre, Greg Harrison. Actually, and if you check our Instagram, Greg responded to the post that Greg Harrison mask of Alex Auld is the last Greg Harrison mask made for an NHL goaltender. So as Alex walks us through all these masks in his career, there were quite a few pieces of history. The Ozzy Osbourne signed mask that he had in junior that he actually had to wear for his first year pro. The fact that he actually had to challenge this Canadian Hockey League, the CHL, to get an exemption to wear something other than an eye tech because his head was just too damn big and he needed a better protection or a different fit of protection than eye tech offered. And then he got one made up. I can't remember what that one was. It's in the story. And then when he made it, I know Lefebvre came later in his career. So when he had it made up, then he made an all-star team, and iTech showed up because it was going to be on TV and slapped a sticker on the back ear, so all of a sudden it at least looked like an iTech. So just all kinds of glimpses behind the scenes from Alex, including a pair of Swiss knee pads that at one point in the NHL, almost every goalie wanted to have. And I think the NHL probably wishes none of them, in retrospect, had them.
Well, let's stick with that theme and Swiss hockey. And the tie-in here is Michael Lawrence, who coaches with Lugano of the Swiss Elite League, also runs Pro Goaltending. You can follow him on Twitter at @pro_goaltending. And his Twitter handle is WizardML. He's coached Elvis Merzļikins in the past, also runs his own goaltending camps through the course of the season, has high aspirations to take his skill level to another level. But right now he's focused on his health. After this season in Europe, he's back home and he's recovering from his bout with the coronavirus and COVID-19. And we thank Michael Lawrence for spending some time with us to share his experience, what he went through battling the virus, and also a little bit about the Swiss Elite League and what they went through prior to the shutdown. Here's Michael Lawrence on In Goal Radio, the podcast. So let's start, Michael, with the most important thing. How are you feeling, and where is your health at right now?
So I mean, right now I've been symptom-free for about 3 days. During that time, I've been home, I believe, since the 14th of March, and I was tested on the 17th of March, and I didn't get the results for a really long time, actually. So I kind of went through everything that I did, not really knowing, but at the same time, the symptoms were pretty obvious. But right now, guys, I'm feeling better. I guess the best way of just saying is, I'm still dealing with, fatigue, I think, every now and then. But I think if you get any kind of virus, you're not going to feel like 100%, of yourself for quite a little while. So it's kind of where I'm at right now, and just trying to get as much rest as possible and do a little more every day.
Were you scared?
Oh, for sure. I think it's such an interesting time for us, where I think, you're not really, you're worried about all kinds of things. You know what I mean? Not a lot of that you can really control. And I think that's why that this is such a scary event for people that are going, we're all going through it. But I think it's such a scary event for people in general right now, because you just don't know how you're going to react. And I think that's what is, the biggest fear in our society right now. So I think that's one of the toughest things about this, and even if you have minor symptoms and you're going through those minor symptoms, you're reading and you're on social media and you're, seeing the news of how quickly things turn. So I think, that can get into people's minds as well who are going through it. And I think that's a pretty scary reality.
How bad was it, Mike? Like, how bad did it get for you as you were, especially just being at home and waiting on the results, in terms of how the illness affected you?
So I would say when I first got home, I had minor headache, and I had, I had some minor symptoms that I was feeling probably on the on the 16 and 17. And, I was a little bit achy and whatnot. They weren't tremendous symptoms, but, at the same time, I live in Lugano, Switzerland, which is, it's 20 minutes from the hub of where a lot of this, where things got pretty bad in Italy. And, so, in your mind, you're certainly concerned and you're worried, and after just taking a flight, you just don't know what you're going to encounter on the plane either. So, but I think I think where it got scary for me, Kev, was, I had those initial symptoms and then it kind of went down, and then midpoint. So if I was tested on the 17th, I would say about a week from there, things were dialing down. I was still very fatigued. But then there was 2 nights where, basically just getting up to go to the washroom, I felt like my heart was just going to pop out of my chest. I thought I was having a heart attack, it was really, really scary. And, that's actually something kind of common that people are going through. So, a later conversation with the nurse, was that if you're feeling those symptoms, and this is just a general message to anyone out there, alert the hospital. If you do have the information that you are positive, obviously alert the hospital and tell them. Alert the hospital or the ER, and then go. I was lucky, but I would say to anyone that, if you're feeling these symptoms, they can't be taken lightly, for sure. And so I was a little bit lucky there. And for me, those were my 2 scary nights. I think it was mostly where I was just feeling extreme migraines. I was having these migraines, and then at the same time, I was going through the heart stuff and, hot and sweaty and whatnot. And then things kind of just started getting slowly better as well. But my last 3 days, I think I've been well on the mend. So I've been feeling much better. Today I was a little more tired. And through all of that, you have a little bit of, in my case, I have a bit of shortness of breath, which has kind of slowly gone away. But when even you'd be talking on the phone, you would have to take a big gasp of air because your lungs just can't take it, sort of thing. So for the most part, that's kind of what my experience was. But it's pretty scary stuff. But I think at the same time, the more people know about this stuff and can identify, hopefully it can help some other people as well.
I was just going to say, in terms of symptoms and identifying it, you talked about some of the ones that you went through. You didn't go to hospital at the time. You actually hadn't gotten your positive diagnosis yet as you were going through some of the worst of it. Mm-hmm. Looking back and talking to medical people since coming through on the other side of it, do you think you should have probably maybe gotten yourself into hospital? Would that be something you'd recommend to other people? I mean, obviously at a time when we're all trying to be sensitive and not overburden the system as well.
That's a really tough question. And you're bang on. You're in my mind at the time, I think I was trying not to overburden, as you're saying, the system. But at the same time, if you're feeling those symptoms, it's not because you're having a panic attack. And to be honest with you, I think in my position, not knowing the results, I think I was thinking that I was getting into my own head. You know what I mean? And I thought I was just having a panic attack. You know what I mean? So maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I'm not a doctor, guys. I don't know these things. But I think if you're feeling those symptoms, you should not roll the dice. And I think for the information that I had at that time, at that moment, if I had the positive test and I knew that, I certainly would have went. So I think, I think we're all trying not to grind down our system here medically. And, but at the same time, I think I think people really have to listen to their bodies and to what they need. And if you need the proper medical attention, then you have to go out and seek it.
Michael, you were transitioning from Lugano to North America. Do you know how you came in contact with the virus?
No, that's the thing about this virus. I think, we don't know enough about it, obviously, and it could have been from the flight. It could have been, from back in Lugano. You know what I mean? When I left, things were still pretty normal, where people were still eating, out for lunch, and people were getting coffee and, at coffee shops. And, I can't say that I was, not doing all those things. You know what I mean? So,
well, normal's relative, because it's interesting. Hutch, you pointed out that the hockey world had changed big time over there.
Yeah, well, Michael, I was just curious, because we know, as a way of looking forward, the NHL has discussed the possibility of playing in front of empty rinks, and my understanding is that's something that you've experienced. So we'd love to know about that.
Yeah, well, I think some of you guys know about, we have these derbies in Swiss, and so a derby is your local rivalry.
Okay.
I've been fortunate enough to be a part of this local rivalry in a special way in my last 6 seasons in the league, because I've coached both organizations, or I've been, a goalie coach for both organizations, Ombry, Piota, and also Lugano. And our last game of the season was against Ombry. And anyone who's ever seen this, or if you YouTube it or anything like that, you guys will see that, I mean, take a soccer derby and multiply that by 100, and it's just this crazy event that it's really special to be a part of. And from the fans and from the build-up that happens within the two towns, they're 45 minutes apart. That was in a completely empty building, and the only person, which I thought was, at first I thought, why is he in here? But as it went, I found it more and more interesting. Was our mascot was the only was the only person inside of the building. But I thought that was just really symbolic to the time, and the mascot was maybe overdoing it, but you could see that he's looking around like where is everyone, and but
at least he had a mask and gloves on.
It was yeah. But it was tough. I think it was tough on the players, for sure, because the environment is completely different. Maybe it changes things for the players with their approach, or maybe some players might even be better. It's a very interesting thing to witness, and certainly with the magnitude of the game and what it meant, and then all of a sudden you're playing in front of no one. It's I'm sure it'll be the same if NHL teams go down that path. I think there'll be a transition phase for players who will have to
Did the players talk about the experience afterwards? I mean, I understand that a lot of professional athletes have actually come forward and said they wouldn't be interested in playing in front of an empty house, and not until everybody can come back should we be moving forward. What was the players' experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, there was the interesting thing there is we had a player, Julien Vauclair. He spent a bit of time in North America. I don't know if you guys remember Jules, but he's with Ottawa, and he had a pretty outstanding career in Switzerland. He was our leader, and a huge part of Lugano hockey for many, many years, and won a few championships there. That was Jules. That was his last game, in his career. And for a guy who I'm not sure if this is right, but I think he played over 50 derbies or whatever it was in his career. And that's your last game of your career. It was pretty strange circumstances, but I mean, I think that's all over the board right now, with
20-year-old junior players,
with player, sure. Or NHL guys, there's a very good chance that was the end of the season. I know they're on hold here, but I'm sure that's not going to be the last we'll see of it. But no, I think guys had a difficult time dealing with it. We didn't get the opportunity to go any further down the rabbit hole, unfortunately, which there could have been that adaptation maybe, to how guys handled the change. It was really just the one game, and so if the NHL comes back and they're playing in front of no fans, I mean, I'm sure players will adapt. At the end of the day, it's about winning. And they're professionals. They'll adapt for sure. So,
what was the strangest part about that game, that moment that jumps out at you?
I would just say the inside of a derby itself and the emotion that surrounds a derby. It's a very, very loud environment, and I think the guys even just had a hard time taking that footprint, away, and seeing that the situation wasn't the same, wasn't what it normally was. Maybe some guys were better prepared than others for that. But when you're in an environment that has such energy, and all of a sudden it's gone, I think for me that's what made it very unique and strange at the same time. And I think a lot of players would have a really difficult time. It's basically like a Montreal versus Toronto scenario, and it's
right.
going to be a very loud building and a very tough atmosphere for the visiting club to go into regularly, and you certainly lean on your fans in that sense, and then all of a sudden that's gone. And I think,
it makes me wonder, Michael, how somebody like Elvis Merzļikins would do, because you've had experience with him in Europe, and he's an emotional guy and gets feeds off the fans and feeds off the environment and then feeds the environment. So I'm just trying to connect those two dots.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you said that, because I think a guy like Elvis would probably have a little bit more of a difficult time without that energy surrounding him. But at the same time, I think that's also, just on the flip of this, I think that's also something that over our time together, I think, you guys will soon learn the more he plays, is that, on a Tuesday night in Arizona, or, an arena where it may be a bit quieter, I do think he's obtained the ability to grab that focus, and I think that's a big part of where Elvis has kind of evolved, over the years, because that was certainly, an issue in the past. But I think at the same time, I think when the energy is there, he's no stranger to it either, as we all know. So, yeah.
Do you, to switch to happier note in the season that Elvis had, or is in the midst of having, depending on how, or if we get a chance to finish here, how closely did you pay attention to it, Michael? And how exciting was it to see the success he had, especially here in the second half? And, if I know him and know you well enough, I'm guessing there were conversations back and forth. What can you share with listeners who maybe haven't gotten a chance to see him, obviously as much as you, about, you know, the type of goalie, the type of person he is, and how much you've enjoyed this past little while watching him get to show the rest of the world what he's all about?
Well, I think that was the cherry on the top was when I sat down with Elvis for the first time. We kind of went through an interviewing process, and I don't think he realized at the time that, you know, I was kind of thinking about taking the job in Lugano. Things in Europe are a little different. You know, I was signed for the following season halfway through my last year with Ombre, which is not the same in obviously North America. North America, you can't do those things. But I think when I first encountered meeting him, there was this kid who really wanted to know if he was good enough to play on that stage. And he had to work through immaturities, both away and on the ice. And going through that process with him, I think he learned a lot. I think I learned a lot. And, you know, it was really special to see a guy who, you know, basically now he knows he can play on that stage, and I'm interested to see, you know, where that will all go, you know, and he's done a lot of work, and I think what a lot of people may or may not know, when you're in those circumstances and when you're going through that transition as an athlete or as a person, you really have to face certain truths, and Elvis had to face certain truths, and as a player, but as a person, and you know, that slowly evolved, and you know, seeing where he is now, and obviously the relationship that we have, and the trust that was grown through those years, that's the best thing about everything.
So in Elvis proving to himself and validating his skill set and his belief in his abilities on the National Hockey League level, does that in some way do the same thing to your belief in your career and your aspirations?
I think in ways, yes. I think you know, my thing as a coach is I think every season you always look at yourself and you're always looking at, okay, where can I go to get better? You know, and, you know, but the reality is a lot of the truths are always kind of right in front of you, and they're with the players that you work with. And I think, you know, Elvis allowed myself to grow in a big way, because, you know, when you're with such a talented athlete like that, you have to take their talents and harness their talents and obviously help them grow in those areas. But then you've also got to be able to disguise certain things that may not be, you know, their strong points, and help them understand in the right manner, in the right fashion, that these are areas that you need to be able to get better at. And you need to be able to set a plan in order to do that. When you work with guys like Elvis, you know, I've described him quite often as a bit of a rock star. You know, you have to be careful how you do that, you know, and, you know, Craig Ireland used to say, you know, you're the lion tamer, because, you know, Elvis had a bit of a short fuse sometimes, and we had to make that grow. But, you know, again, you kind of have to be careful how you do that. And at the same time, you have to take those things where you feel are their weakness, but help them grow, you know, and there's a ton of learning that goes inside of all those things, from personality to talent to, you know, but at the end of the day, you really have to be in a position where, if you're working with high-end talent like that, you're going to grow, you know, and at the same time, again, it's all right in front of you, but it's kind of how you place it and what you do with it.
Do you have an example of this?
Ooh, well, I got to be careful. I don't want to, say too much, but I think a lot had to do with trust. When Elvis has had a different kind of life, and he's had a tough upbringing as a kid, and he's not shy to talk about it. But I want to be careful. But I think a lot of that was trust, and I don't think we really got rolling until about Christmas on our first year. I think you would agree to that. It took a long time to develop that trust. But there's no quick way of setting things free so that that you can work together, and there's that ability to read off each other, and there's people have motives, and I think he had to learn from me, and I had to learn from him. He had to know that my motives were pretty simple. I believed in his talent. I believed in what he could be. And I think once he understood that genuine intent, I think that's kind of where things changed, and we were able to do pretty special things through our time together. In our first season, we lost 1-0 in Zurich in Game 7 of the finals, and we had a great ride, through that time, and as not just from a technical standpoint, but also just from who he's become as a man, but you have to be able to break down walls, and there's no quick fixes in doing that sometimes, and again, I'm tremendously proud of who he's become, and he's a very special talent.
Before we let you go, just we've talked a lot about Elvis. Just your philosophy on goaltending and where you see the position going.
Well, for me, I mean, I think it's very important that you understand what you have when you're working with guys, and you understand the strong points of a goalie and what they bring. And you have to harness that and make it clearly night and day their strengths. At the same time, I think there's always certain areas which can get better, and allowing them to understand that in a non-threatening way, and in a way where they understand that you've got their back, and that you're trying to achieve the same goal. I think that's a big thing about. Oh, that's my dog, guys. Bauer. Interview at home here. Hey. Sorry, guys.
It's okay, awesome. Especially because his name is Bauer and he's a golden retriever. That's perfectly acceptable.
That's outstanding. You know what? It's not a bad time to wish you the best, and thank you for joining us, coming off what you've been through and this ordeal throughout the hockey season, and let's catch up on better terms when everything's back up and running, and we can really dive into the philosophies.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk
Thank you, Michael.
on better circumstances.
Thanks, Michael.
Say hi to Bauer.
Bauer's pumped that he was in the interview, guys. So that's
right. We're not cutting it. We're not cutting it. He's staying in. Thanks, Michael.
All right,
be
guys.
good.
Ciao.
That was a unique interview. Something we haven't touched on is life-challenging battles, and Michael Lawrence has seen it all. Boy, and you think about it, like Elvis is such a personality, and we get into that, but you go right back to the start, and kind of gives you a reason to be a lot more cautious, even in this midst of washing your hands and taking social distancing so seriously.
Yeah, absolutely, and It wasn't. We were gonna hold and talk to Michael a little later about sort of his coaching and his career, and we'll get back to him on that because he working with pro goaltending in the summer and some of his experience as a pro coach. Obviously, we know about Merzļikins, but number of guys that he's had an influence on, working with the pro goaltending schools out of Ontario. So I mentioned Jacob Ingham, Colton Point. There's a pretty deep list there. So that was a conversation we had hoped to have with him in the future, but it just, once I'd heard that he'd actually diagnosed positive, and just talking to him before we talked on the air a couple days ago about just how much this beat him up and how scary it was at times, I thought it was good. He's a guy that felt it's important for other people to realize how serious, not that none of us are taking it not seriously, but just realize what it can be like and what the experience can be like. And so I really appreciate him as he's just starting to get his feet back under him and his wind in his sails, so to speak, taking a little time to chat with us.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think as we all get in our close-knit circles at home and we're avoiding the rest of the world for the most part, it's very easy to forget how serious this is, unless you're, checking in every night with the nightly news. So it's great that Michael's able to bring it home for us, to the goaltending community.
Mathieu Garon, available to us. We appreciate his time. Also, goaltenders that are still involved in their playing careers, becoming more and more available as they experience this NHL pause. So between the podcast, In Goal Radio, and the In Goal Premium subscription aspect of it, it's a busy time for you, Woody.
Yeah, no, we got a couple big names coming up here for pro reads and maybe a little quick chats as well for the podcast. I've got Carter Hart set up tomorrow for pro reads. So if you're a member at In Goal Premium, you can look forward to his breakdowns on some of his saves this year, kind of share the mindset, the read that goes into save selections and depth selections and why he plays how he does and the success he has. I'm looking forward to that. Maybe grab a few minutes. He's already been a podcast guest, of course, earlier this season, but maybe grab a few more minutes for the pod. And then Hutch has got a big name coming up on Thursday night as well.
Thursday night, talking to Jonathan Bernier, connected to him through our good friend Marco Marciano, a coach in Montreal, development coach with the Canadians, and he works with Jonathan in the summers and has for many years. So he connected us and had a great chat just last night with Jonathan, and he's up for a podcast and some pro reads as well. I think one of the things I really enjoyed, I did the initial edit of the Jake Allen stuff this week, and one of the things I really enjoyed was the number of times I heard Kevin apologize for taking up so much time, and the number of times it was so clear, from Jake that he was just happy to be talking hockey and he didn't mind at all. And I think all these guys are chomping the bit to get back, and they enjoy the opportunity to get back and talk about it.
You weren't supposed to see. That was the thing. I even said, you probably, as you're editing it, you probably heard me say Millard would think this is hilarious, the number of times I've said this, Jake, but just one more clip.
We need a series of t-shirts that have Kevin's face and just one more question. And probably on the back it says Millard's going to tease me about it, but
so it has been pretty good, and we got to say thanks. Like Jake actually awesome. spent a full hour going over video with me on Friday night, and we'll be able to bring those. We brought the first one to In Goal Premium membership. We'll be able to break those out. We've got Cal Peterson. We've got, like I said, Carter Hart and Jonathan Bernier coming up. I've got some other guys in the queue, hopefully for the following week. And when you add that up, we still have a few left over from guys like Martin Jones and Craig Anderson and Frederick Anderson and Carey Price. So we're going to be able to continue to bring you our In Goal Premium membership, these pro reads and these breakdowns, I shouldn't say in perpetuity while this goes on, but right now it looks like we've got it covered for hopefully this, as long as this lasts and beyond. So an exciting feature, I think, at In Goal Premium that we've started, and I can't thank the NHL guys enough for taking the time to allow us to continue this at a time when we don't have access to them at the rink. And in some ways, it's almost easier doing it over Zoom because we're both looking at the same thing rather than multiple cameras running. So it's been pretty good.
Oh, we appreciate everybody listening and subscribing. And Mathieu Garon with a shout out to he's a big fan of what is happening at In Goal Radio, In Goal Magazine, and In Goal Premium right now. The Southpaw with some unique perspective on things. Love the fact that he stays in touch with that Stanley Cup championship team and his idea of coming out and being so aggressive at the shootout out to the hash marks. He was very aggressive at it and gave this shooter something to think about. So a Southpaw there, and whether you're coming at it from the north or the south, keep your needle pointed in a positive direction. Thanks for listening to In Goal Radio, the podcast.